Welcome back, Streamer Nation. I'm your host, Michael Simeone, and you are listening to the SP Streamer Podcast, part of the Fantrax and FantraxHQ.com family. Let's welcome in my wonderful co-host, Lauren Auerbach. What's going on, Lauren?
Not much, Michael. I was talking to you a little bit earlier before the show, and I was saying I'm in my first draft champions ever with Battle of the Pods. And so it's a little intimidating. I feel like I'm working, going with people that know their stuff. And I'm enjoying it. But I feel like my brain's going to explode. I feel like there's a lot of I don't know. But
Speaking of brain exploding, I know you watched Ozark. We will not discuss any spoilers, but that was a pretty, I felt like mind-blowing finale of the first half of the last season, right?
It was good. I basically, we just kind of blew through them. I think they just recently released them, and we just boom, 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 watched them. They were really great.
Yep, same. Yeah, it was only released a little over an hour ago, I think. A week ago.
Yeah.
Hour ago, that'd be pretty impressive. Anyway, back to the Battle of the Pods. I'm in it as well, a different league though. But it's going to be a really good learning experience for you. I agree. It's really tough because you're in tough rooms with people in the industry. So it's just everyone knows the correct route to go, the correct players to choose. So it just makes it extremely, extremely difficult opposed to just random people.
But I'm happy to do it. I think it's a good way to kind of dive in, and we'll just kind of see how I do. But it's been fun so far, like I said. But yeah, and this is also why I'm excited for our guest, who we'll be talking to in a minute, who knows a thing or two about roster construction and FBC stuff. So I am looking forward to picking her brain.
All right, so let's bring her in.
Yeah.
Our guest is a NFBC high stakes player. You can follow her on Twitter at JennyButler830, and that is Jenny Butler. What's going on, Jenny?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Good. I got your Twitter handle right?
Yes.
Okay.
830 is my birthday. I just couldn't figure out what else to do.
I'm just saying
Jenny Butler is so common that you can't just use your name. There's so many of them, so you have to find some random thing to put on the end of it.
I got Dave's handle last week wrong, so that's why I'm asking.
You got to add that.
Did you forget that? Right? Did you forget that D? I
forgot to add that D. That's the problem. So Lauren alluded to it. We're going to talk a little bit about roster construction and some KDS, and then main event. Hopefully we could get to everything. But first, I just want to talk about First Pitch Arizona really quick. Jenny was there. I was there. I got to sit next to you while we watched a baseball game, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So are you going back next year?
I will go back next year. I mean, I plan to. I've gone this past year was my third time going. So I went 2018, 19, and then we had to skip 2020, and I was back in 2021.
What are your favorite parts of First Pitch?
It's interesting. The first 2 years I was there, I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't know. I could recognize people from afar, and but everybody's sort of gathered together in these circle conversations and stuff, and I was just way too scared to just walk into the middle of a conversation and be like, hey everybody. So I just sort of held back, and I'd have some conversations with people that were sitting right next to me during the sessions and stuff. But this year I really tried to just bite the bullet and make an effort to just talk to people. And I think, being on Twitter a little bit more over the 2020, pandemic time, and being on a couple podcasts helped me to sort of not be as nervous about it. But, it's really, the socializing is probably the best part. But I think that all of it is great. And I know that, you and some of the guys in your frat house there were not as active in the sessions and the games and stuff as some people are, but you really should. You really should try to get your butt out of bed early and make it to the sessions and do the thing, because otherwise, what are you paying for? You could just go stay in a house that's next to the conference and not pay for it if you just wanted to socialize. So I would recommend that you really immerse yourself in it.
Michael, what were you doing instead there?
No, so I definitely did see a bunch of panels, and I did go see a game with everyone, but we missed some early panels, and I can only blame my housemates because one night we played poker with a bunch of people, and they made it out in the morning, but we didn't finish till like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. So that definitely hurt us one time. And then another time I wanted to, but others were just like, no, we want to go to breakfast, stay in. So that happened. So I missed some early
all that good
ones.
information.
Some early ones. I did see some really, really good panels, but yeah, I unfortunately did miss those. But next year,
the games are great too. Just going to a game that's, there's just hardly anybody there, and you can just sit wherever you want. And like, if you ever want a foul ball, you can just like get one.
You'll get one. Yep.
And
absolutely.
it's just like, it's just a nice environment. I love going to the games.
Well, maybe we'll see Lauren there in the future.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Just go next season. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they actually announced in the back of the forecaster that next year's is early November, I think.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. It used to be in November, and then they moved it up. And
I think it's early November, yeah.
I liked it much better in November, partly because, it's great to watch the playoff games when you have it in October. It's great to have those on for people to gather around.
That was fun, yeah.
But it also kind of interferes with doing stuff, going to the games. You're like, well, I could watch this playoff game, or I could just go to this random, Arizona Fall League game. It's hard to do both. So plus, in November, it's cold by that time in Ohio, at least. And so it's that much better to like go to Arizona, and get that warmth.
Yeah, there was one night where a lot of us did not go see a game in person because we stayed back to watch a playoff game. So that's a good point. All right, let's move on to roster construction. Jenny, you did a fantastic, I guess you could call it article for Draft Kit for FTN. I read it. It was really good. Seems to actually be the most popular article. Vlad said it. I saw a lot of people commented on it. So congratulations to that. And then you actually, you're starting to write for Fantrax?
Yeah, I talked to Eric Cross a little bit ago about doing some articles for Fantrax, and I've also talked to Butler a little bit too. So I haven't written anything yet, but I sort of have talked to both of them about doing stuff this season, and I hope it'll work out. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
that draft article was the first thing I've ever written, so I want to try and branch out a little bit.
I'm sure you're going to be extremely successful with it because based off that, it was very good. And Fantrax is building a nice team over there. So all right. So in the article, which we're going to discuss a little bit, you talk about recognizing the player pool as the first step. You mentioned using SGP. Can you explain what that is and how you personally try and utilize it?
So SGP stands for standings gain points, and it's something that I personally learned from Tanner Bell and Jeff Zimmerman in the process. They go through it pretty well. There's some other books and tools. Tanner has some tools on his website. It's basically just a way of calculating how many points a player will earn for your team in the rotisserie standings. So it's a way of it's based on the historical results for a league. So having something like NFBC where you can look back and look at historical results is very handy. But even in your home leagues, you can look back at the historical results for your league and use it in those calculations. So once you have the historical results, you just sort of look at how many points, a certain number of each statistic will get you. Like for instance, based on 2021, like 6 home runs, this is NFBC, 6 home runs will get you 1 point in the standings. So you can count on for every 6 home runs that a player gets for you, that you'll get a point in the standings. So basically it takes that stat for every one of the categories and adds them together. So, you might have a 3.5 in one category. And so it adds up to something around, 17, 19, 20. And it's just sort of a way to have one number to compare players. So it gives you a way to compare players that have different skill sets. So like Miles Straw, for instance, has a very similar SGP to Chris Bryant. So it's just a way to sort of look at how each of their statistical comparisons add up. It can have limitations. It doesn't take, roster construction, for instance, into account. Are Miles Straw's stolen bases really more valuable in the whole context of everything than Chris Bryant's home runs? And, consequently, how much does his lack of home runs hurt you? But it is a way to sort of just take all of the categorical contributions together and just sort of sum it up in one number, which can be really handy to just have a single number to look at.
Can you discuss how you evaluate position scarcity when you build your roster?
Yeah, so the way that I do it and the way that I described it in the draft guide is that I look at each position and I look at it sort of, once I get my spreadsheet together, I sort of look at it from top to bottom and say, like, where are the pockets of players that I like? Do I like the guys at the very top of a position? Do I like some guys in the middle? And then most importantly, like, where is the last guy that I'm willing to have as my starter? And that way I can sort of map out how to draft. If I know that I don't like any shortstops past the 6th round, then I need to get a shortstop by the 6th round. And maybe I'll like first basemen that are in the 10th round. And so I know that I can wait a little bit. And it's just a way to sort of map out a strategy based on positions to sort of try and make sure that I'm optimizing getting the players that I like personally.
Right. And then
go on.
You know.
I was just going to say, I know you mentioned using like Steamer 600. I found that pretty interesting. So Steamer 600, for those that don't know, is basically it takes players' projections, right, and makes it as if they all have 600 plate appearances. So how do you kind of utilize that in terms of looking at positions and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the people who do the playing time projections are doing it, with a lot of research taken into account. They know what they're doing, but things can change so quickly, from day to day in the preseason. Things can change, on day 1 of the season when somebody gets hurt. So it's just a way to kind of compare the base skill sets of a player. So I use it more often than not to just find either sleepers at a position or some late like draft champions picks, things like that, so that you can sort of see, like, for instance, one of the players that sort of bubbled up in my article was Rowdy Tellez. So Rowdy Tellez, we don't know yet exactly what his playing time is going to be. And if you look at straight up projections, he's not projected for full-time at bats, but there's a decent chance that he gets them, especially, if a couple of things fall just right for him on the Brewers. So like, it's a good way to sort of have players sort of come up that you maybe wouldn't have noticed if you're just looking through a full set of projections. Because a lot of times when we look at projections, at least I know for me, I tend to just sort of look at the, home run steals, and I don't spend as much time as I should just looking at what are they saying this guy's how many at bats he's gonna get, plate appearances, and do I really agree with that? So it's just sort of a way to, like, have some guys come up to maybe take a closer look at.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because I kind of would have never thought to do that. But I think it's a good way to find, like you say, find players with good skill sets where if they do find that spot in the lineup, then they could be really good and, be beneficial to your team. So I thought that was really interesting that you mentioned that. So I wanted to bring that up specifically. So you discuss, you show, like, in the article too, almost kind of like, you put up an image too of how you do it. You discuss how to create like a roadmap based on positions and like how you want to tackle them at certain parts of the drafts. Can you just kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So you're talking about the flowchart sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wrote it out for, I think, 4 or 5 rounds in the draft article, but really I do it longer than that. I do it for maybe 10 rounds, where I just sort of take a look at, okay, in the first round, there are speed options. And if a guy is, power and speed, like a Tatis, for instance, I'll just put him in the speed category because that's like really what I'm drafting him for. So I'll have kind of guys in the speed category, the power category, like a Vlad Jr., and then a pitcher. And I sort of will work through what, if I were to take Vlad in the first round, well, what does that mean for what I need to do in rounds 2, 3, 4, and so on? So, that means I'm going to have to focus more on speed in, those first 4 rounds, because a lot of the speed goes in the first 4 or 5 rounds. So you have to get to it fast. And, if I do that, then, if I need to take, a couple of speed guys after that, well, then where does that leave me with pitching and with closers and things like that? So it's sort of a way to work through some scenarios in your head, and you can do it. It helps to do it also once you have your draft pick selected, so you can really focus in on who will realistically be available to you. But, it helps me, I'll look through all these different scenarios, and then it's easier to sort of pick which path I think I like the best. But even then, I have that with me in the draft room, and I can pivot to plan B, C, or D if plan A doesn't really work out the way I want. So when something doesn't work out, I'm not panicked. I can just look at what I've done, and I already know that if I didn't get this guy, I can go this other direction, and it can still make it all work in the end.
Can you discuss category targets and how you use them in the draft?
Yeah, for me, especially with NFBC, you can see all of the historical results. So I just tend to take the standard value that a lot of people use is the 80% mark. So 80% of the, the number one, the highest statistic. And I use them in the draft to sort of calculate how I'm doing as I go along. I don't really worry about whether they're 100% accurate or not, like whether that's really the target that I have to get to, but it's more of a way to balance, speed and power and things like that, so that I know that I'm kind of getting enough of each, even if I end up a lot of times, because I tend to kind of use even a little bit higher numbers than the 80%. So a lot of times I'll come up at like 85% of those numbers across the board at the draft, which is fine as long as it's balanced. And that's kind of what I use it for.
Yeah, and I think, one point that you had made, and I think it kind of stuck out for me doing kind of these, if you're in, if you're switching over to, NFBC and you're in leagues where you don't allow trading, it doesn't do you any good to kind of stockpile and kind of corner the market on a certain category because you can't trade. And so, you want to kind of hit that target, but it's also, you point out it's also dangerous to kind of go over that target as well because you're not really gaining anything, which I thought was an interesting point.
Yeah, I did that I did an auction league and live in Vegas last year, and I don't remember. I need to go back and look at what my draft sheet said I was at the end of it, but I ended up with so much speed because I was it was the first auction I'd done in a while, and I got in there and I just like all of a sudden all of these fast guys are available to you because you're not subject to the way the draft plays out. And so I just kept bidding on them, and I ended up with Whit Merrifield and Jose Ramirez and Garrett Hampson and all these guys. And I ended up with like 30 more steals than the next lowest guy. And all the power guys that I took didn't work out. And so I was just horribly unbalanced, and I could not get it right. And I ended up like one spot out of the money in that league, which was really frustrating.
Yeah, I noticed myself last year, I focused a little too much on speed as well. I mean, I still ended up being okay, but like I noticed that in like half my leagues, I was suffering more so in power compared to speed. I think sometimes we just get a little carried away because we know it's so important and we have to hit it early, that sometimes maybe we just keep thinking speed, where, you probably have enough already. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Not to, that's the most difficult part, is getting that balance on your team and making sure you're perfectly balanced across the board. And that's what makes it so hard. But moving on to your bench. How do you like to break down your bench? I know you do main event leagues, so like in fab leagues like that, do you have a set number of how many players per position, or does it kind of depend on your team? Talk a little bit about that.
So personally for me, I like to have, during the week of setting lineups, I like to have at least 2 options at each position. So, because we can reset lineups for hitters on Fridays, and you just never know when somebody's going to get hurt, even like between Sunday night and Monday. So I try to keep as many bench positions free as possible. So what I ideally would like to have is a corner infielder on my bench that is at the opposite position from the one that's at corner in my starting lineup. So if I draft my corner as a first baseman, I like to have a third baseman on my bench. And the same with second and short for middle infield. And then I like to have an outfielder, couple of starters, maybe a reliever, and then I will carry like one stash position. And at the beginning of the season, that can be an injured player. I don't often do that, although last year I drafted Framber Valdez, and that worked out pretty well. But the stash could be, once the season starts, it could be a player that, on your team that you drafted that got injured. Or it could be, you know, somebody at the draft who's got a good matchup in the first couple of weeks. It's sort of just like one sort of wild card spot, I guess you can call it.
Do you make it a point to get someone who's multi-eligible at all, or not really?
I do prioritize multi-position guys a lot because that just frees everything up so much more, you know, especially if you can have somebody that's both corner and middle eligible. You know, that reduces, you know, like I said, when I like to have 2 people at every position, that helps a lot. If you can have even more flexibility by having multi-position eligible guys, I love having that.
Yeah.
What about prospects? Do you dare to stash them, or you just kind of not even look at them?
Probably extremely unlikely.
Yeah.
I definitely
Especially
won't take one. Yeah, I definitely don't take one that I have to spend a significant pick on. You know, it's very easy to say Bobby Witt's going to be up, you know, early in the season, but what if he's not? Maybe he won't be. We don't really know. You know, we like to think that we know a lot, but we don't really know. So, you know, if it's a 25th to 30th round pick, you know, and I think that's the best stash that I see out there, then sure, maybe, but I'm not going to hang on to them very long. If I have injuries or anything that come up, you know, he's gone. So I don't want to spend an early pick on it because I don't want to have to carry him when he doesn't come up when we thought he was supposed to.
What about someone like Shane Baz, who you know is going to get, he will either start the year or worst case, most likely get called up the second he's allowed to. Is that someone that you would take a chance on or no?
I mean, I can't say I won't get him on a team or two, but I'm not targeting him specifically. I mean, for starters, we don't know that he won't spend the first 3 weeks or so in the minors. Right. We don't know that they won't limit his innings in some other way during the season. And, you know, I appreciate everything that the fantasy community does to provide analysis on players, but I think sometimes we don't spend enough time thinking about, you know, what the team might want and what the team could do. And, you know, if they don't need him at the start of the season, you know, they've got Rasmussen, they've got McClanahan, they've got, you know, Corey Kluber. I mean, if all those guys are healthy and ready to go at the start of the season, they might not need him. And that might be a good strategy for them to not use him at the beginning of the season so that they can have him later. And then if he's not in the lineup at the beginning of the season, what are you going to do? How long are you going to hold on?
Yeah.
You know, it's difficult. You know, all of a sudden you get a couple injuries and your bench is full. So it's not my style, but he does, you know, it's hard not to get caught up in the hype. So I can't promise that I won't have a share or two, but you know, it's not an ideal scenario for me.
Right. Maybe if you start off with a really good base in the beginning, and it's still hard though where he's going. It's not like he's going late enough where
I know.
You can.
I'm more likely to do it in a DC or a best ball where you have such a deep bench that at the beginning of the season, you're probably fine. You haven't had all those injuries build up yet. So, you know, it's probably more likely there than like in a main event.
I took him in Battle of the Pod. So that's a DC. The DC though. So,
it's a DC. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right. Do you like Shane Baz, Lauren?
I do like Shane Baz. He was falling a little bit in our draft, I felt like. I mean, it was clear that some of these guys that either, you know, you don't know about their playing time or, you know, say you project like 130 innings for him, like those guys were just sitting for a very long time. And
you know who sat really long in hours is Pablo Lopez.
I think he's been taken up in hours, but very interesting. Because it was interesting because actually Shane McClanahan was sitting for a very long time in ours, and I was really surprised. Doug ended up picking him up.
That is,
and I wasn't sure what that was about, but
because he shouldn't be too limited. That's surprising. He went quick in ours. I'm a little surprised at that.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to KDS. All right, Jenny, you like everybody else this year where you want towards the front of the draft?
I don't know yet. I often in the past I've set my KDS often towards the back half of the draft with sort of leaning towards the middle. I generally like to be more towards the middle just as an overall strategy so that you don't miss out on runs. You sort of can be more on top of things. Sometimes when you're on those ends, it just feels like the entire draft passes you by between your picks. So I don't like that feeling, but every year is different. So once we get closer to March, I'll probably take a look. It's so nice now that NFBC has on their ADP page, you can pull it up as a draft board, as a visual of the draft board. I love that.
Yep.
So I love looking at that and just sort of taking a look even 4 or 5 rounds deep at what will be available to me at different spots. And I'll kind of base it off of that. But I don't know that, current ADP is really going to be the same as what it's going to be later in March. So I'll kind of wait and see. I've set 1 KDS so far this year, and I set it with the picks towards the front, and I got pick 4 in a best ball that I did.
Nice.
Must be nice. I always set my KDS for the front, and I always get the back. So that's been
you get that better round 2 pick.
Yeah.
I
feel like I'm like 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I like that 6, 7 range usually.
Yeah. All right. So do you typically try out different KDS orders almost, or try and get different spots in drafts if you're doing multiple of them? Like I know I've heard a couple of high stakes players say that they like to try them all out, at least like in DCs for the first, 5 to 6 drafts, and then they figure out what they're most comfortable with, and then they move that into like a main event. Do you do the same thing?
I don't, but I think maybe I should.
Okay.
I know that I've heard Phil Dussault say that he actually did that with his 3 main events last year, that he had an early, a middle, and a late pick. I'd have a hard time maybe doing that in a main event just because I don't really want to request a spot that isn't my top choice. That feels weird to me, but I don't think it's a bad idea, in draft champions and things like that, just because even if it's not to test out the different spots, because I think you can look at, like I said, that ADP draft board and get a pretty good idea, but more to diversify, my rosters and how many, players I have, that I don't want to have the same guys on every one of my teams. So it's a way to sort of make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. I thought that was one thing I took away from Phil, as well, as when he said that. It made sense. I don't know whether he did that by design or it just kind of happened to him. I'm sure he tried to do it. But yeah, this way you just don't have, the same players on every single team, and it's just changing things up for you. Like I said, so far this year, I've done several drafts, and I keep getting the 10th pick. I don't know why. And constantly getting the same players. So when I came into Battle of the Pods, I don't mean to keep bringing it up, but when I got into it, I was just Harper was there, but I have 4 Harper shares. So I'm I'm not doing this again. I was let me just try and switch it up and have fun with it. And this was the first draft where I took a pitcher first round. But I think, it's just, I think it's good to do that because, if you have so many shares of one player and they get hurt or don't play well, it could really, hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you typically try and do that? Diversify your, the players that you pick in general?
Yeah, especially at the beginning, the first, 5, 7, 8 rounds of a draft, I try to mix it up as much as I can, just because you can't have one guy get hurt and just blow everything.
Blow all your teams. Yeah.
All right. So you play in the main event. We also discussed that last week. I think the buy-in is $17.50 or something. I forget what it is. So, a good amount of money to enter that. You did 2 of them last year, I think I saw, and you cashed out on one of them. I know you came in second. We had you on the podcast while you were in first, and I know you seemed nervous about it because I know you really wanted it bad. So what ended up kind of happening in the stretch there? And how long, what month did you hold first until?
So I held first until 2 weeks left.
Oh my God.
So the middle of September. I was more or less in first from the end of May until the middle of September.
Oh my God.
But it was very close throughout. I mean, a couple times, I would dip into second and then back up to first again.
Okay.
We were often within 5 points of each other, sometimes like first to third even. So I ended up, staying up there a lot, but I never felt comfortable. But, I think that, some of that, because we were so close, it just sort of came down to, Jeff Mitsef is the one who ended up winning, and he came up so hard. Like he flew up the board and then like, I don't know, probably August. And he just had a really good run, and that happens. But if I had to sort of break it down to one thing, I did really well with my fab throughout. I didn't spend more than, I don't know, $70 on a player throughout until August. And when August 1st fab came around, that's actually the same one that all of the trade deadline picks were. So there's a lot of activity in that one. But it was also the one where Eloy Jimenez was coming back and was available again.
Oh, yeah.
And I needed power and I needed average. And I had the hammer in fab. I had the most by a good amount. And I thought, like, if I can get him here, I could not only like secure the win in the league, but I was also at that time in contention for cashing some overall money, which I've never done before. I was like right in that 30th-ish spot.
Yeah.
And I think 22 got paid this year. So I just thought, this could really be like a game-changing pick for me. This guy was like a second or third rounder going into the season. So I bid $364 on him. And it turned out that the backup bid was only $213, which was like a little dagger.
That's right. That's hard to predict, though.
I was just like, I just made it so that I was sure I was getting him. And in retrospect, I'm not sure that was the best idea. He is like a top-notch player, but, he probably wasn't going to do everything that I was hoping for, with like 8 weeks left. So at the time, it left me with $70 at that point, which I thought, that'll be enough. I can make that work. I've worked with pretty low bids this whole season, but that, especially the $150 that I left on the table with that bid, I really could have used that because at the end of the season, especially in the last month, I've, find that I like to make, instead of 1 or 2 fab pickups, I'm making more like 4 or 5. And I end up bidding, $5 and less on everyone and getting my like second, third, fourth choice in my conditionals instead of my top choice. And, the standings were so close that it's very possible that if I had, been able to get the guys that I wanted in those last few weeks, that it might have made the difference.
So what's one lesson that you learned in 2021 with regards to the main event?
It's kind of a hard one because in that main event league where I did well, I think I could have done better if I held on to a couple of guys too long. I held Mike Moustakis for nearly the entire season because I just believed that one day he was all of a sudden just going to turn it on. It was just going to happen. Yeah. I also held on to Carlos Santana for a really long time in my corner infield spot. I just sort of had faith in this basic skill level of those guys. And I just thought, like, they'll come around. It'll be fine, And so I'm thinking about this year maybe having some sort of self-imposed rule where I need to at least bench a guy if he's not doing well. I did not bench Carlos Santana for a long time, and that was a huge mistake. I just need to at least get those guys on the bench. And, maybe have some sort of rule, like if I have a guy on a bench for X number of weeks, I'm going to make myself drop him. Like if I can't use them, it's sort of like that, when you clean out your closet, if I haven't worn this in 6 months, I'm not going to wear it, that kind of thing. So, but, it's so hard because there's other times in past leagues and even this year where I held on to a guy when he wasn't doing well and he came around. Like I had Jorge Soler on that auction team. And that part of the reason I was in a power hole in that team was because he was not doing very well. And then all of a sudden breaks out, and the other year that I did really well was 2018, and I drafted Herman Marquez in the very last round. He didn't have a great first half, but he had an amazing second half, and I held him that whole time. And it's hard when you have those players in the back of your head, those times that it's worked out. It's so hard to let them go.
And hope, yeah.
And I just need to think like, there's a chance that if I let them go, they'll still be there. I could come back and pick them up 5-6 weeks later.
Exactly.
there's a chance that, you just have to have a short memory. If you let them go, just forget them. Just pretend like you never had them on your team in the first place. Because I can't. It's a mind game.
Yeah. Huh.
I thought Rob Silver brought up a point about that, where he said that he suggested that when people don't really know if they should drop someone or not, they should go to Fangraphs and look at the rest of season projections. And if a player is below, the level of where he should be rostered, where he's considered rosterable and he's on your team, then you should probably just cut bait at that point. Because
that's a really good idea. Yeah.
Instead of just, hoping, I can't do the math off the top of my head, but say with 15 teams and however many are rostered, like say it's, let's just say it's 500 players. If that player on your team is ranked 515, then he shouldn't be on your roster, because you should have someone that's better on your roster. That's, over that before that 500 mark.
That's an interesting way to do it.
I thought it was really interesting as well. And you're probably going to be more right than wrong on those. You will still be wrong, of course, but it's moves like that let Phil Dussault win as well, because he dropped players early when he just figured it's not going to happen. And he ended up benefiting from that several times. So I thought it was a really interesting point by Silver, and something I'm going to consider as well throughout the year in my leagues. So how many main events are you going to do this year? Are you going to kind of bump that up, or you think you're going to stick around 2, or what do you
I think
feeling?
I'm going to stick with 2. I've already signed up so I personally try to do as many drafts live in Vegas as I can, because for me, that's like one of the best parts about NFBC is the live drafts. So I'm actually going to Vegas for 8 days. Partly just because I like Vegas, and I wanted to have some draft days, and then I'm gonna have like the first 4 days probably be all drafts, and then the second 4 days just be like chilling time. And I also just kind of wanted to extend it just enough so I could be there on opening day. I think it'd be fun to be there on opening day.
That'd be cool.
So I'm gonna go for 8 days, and I'm gonna probably do drafts Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So right now I'm signed up for 2 main events and 2 auctions. After I did the auction last year, I actually hadn't planned on doing the auction. I was signed up for a super, which is a standalone league that's a little bit higher price point. It's $2,500. And I just kind of like the idea of doing a standalone league, because the league payouts for winning the league is really high. So I kind of like that idea. But it didn't fill, and they canceled it. So I pivoted to doing the auction. And I don't know that I'll ever not be able to do an auction again, just because it's like it's so freeing, to just be able to bid on anyone and not
to
have
take whoever you want.
Think about the order of the draft. So, and I really will only do auctions if I can do them live. I have no interest at all in doing an online auction. They freak me out. I don't like them. So I'm gonna do 2 auctions and 2 main events, I think, while I'm in Vegas.
Nice.
Yeah, I heard the kind of the whole live auction versus not live. Like once you do a live auction, like you have to go live auction, and once you do, you're like a complete convert.
Yes. Well, my home league is an auction, so I'm used to that, and I know how much I like them. But I think I may have done one online auction at some point years ago. But just the idea of pressing that little +1 button, or having to type in your bid, and the clock running down. And it's just like, I don't like the whole vibe of it. When you're there, the NFBC does such a good job. They run such a good event that, you have an auctioneer there doing it. And the auction just sort of flows as it flows. There's no like 10 seconds till the next bid, 10 seconds till it runs out. It's you have like a time, a freeness to it of like the auctioneer being able to say going once, going twice, and you get another bid in there. And, you can see everybody sitting there, and it's just like, it takes a long time, and I kind of enjoy that. Like, I like the fact that it takes a long time, because like the best part of fantasy is the draft. So I like the vibe of an auction, and I just would never do it if it wasn't live.
How much are the NFBC auction leagues? I'm sure there's several different, but
I know that there are 12-team auctions, and I don't, because that's what Zach Waxman won last year. And I don't know the price point on those, but the auction championship is $1,400.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure Phil won that overall last year. That was what he won along with the main event overall.
Right.
It was like
I
auction
think so.
and main event.
Yeah. Wow. Good old Phil.
I
All
know.
right. Well, that does it, Jenny. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
It was a pleasure.
that's fun.
I like picking your brain because I think you're really good at what you do. And again, I was a big fan of that article on FTN, so had to get
Thank
you
you.
on here.
It was
Yeah.
very good. And I'm glad we were able to nab you because I feel like you can't like swing a dead cat without seeing you somewhere. Like you're on all the podcasts that I listen to. You
It's strange.
and deservedly so. I'm like, wait, Jenny is everywhere, and like I love it, and I think it's great. So I was like, all right, she can stop by SP Streamer.
I think I might have saturated the market a little bit for now. I might need to take a step back. I'm going to do PitchCon on Saturday, and then I think
nice.
I might need to take a little step back.
No,
But yeah, I was happy to come on because, you know, Lauren's done such a great job since she came on. I'm super happy to see you as a co-host on this. You're doing awesome. So
thank you.
I love seeing you. We got Michael outnumbered here.
I know. We'll have to do it more often during the season.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, that does it. Jenny, so what panel are you doing for PitchCon?
Oh God, it's so. When Nick sent this out, I nearly died because I am on a panel with Vlad Sedler and Scott Jensad that is something like the title of it is something like dominating the NFBC, and I'm just like, are you effing kidding me? Like, I've not dominated anything. I've never won a main league. I finished second twice. That's my giant claim to fame. So I don't know how I ended up there. Maybe Nick just didn't know what else to do with me, like where else to put me. But I'm just like, all right, I will show up and I will talk about the NFBC, but this is in no way have I dominated anything yet.
Well, maybe Nick's a psychic and he just knows you're going to have a really good year in 2022.
I hope so. That would be great.
All right. So for those who are listening, you could check out Jenny's PitchCon panel on Saturday, you said?
Saturday at 11 a.m., I think.
Saturday at 11. Okay. And you can follow her on Twitter at Jenny Butler. You can follow Lauren on Twitter at LK Auerbach. I cut off Jenny's Twitter handle at Jenny Butler 830. You follow me on Twitter.
And then you screwed it up.
I know. I just always say I'm the worst host there is, so it's fine. It is what it is. You can follow me on Twitter at SP Streamer. Make sure to check out our website, spstreamer.com. Rate and review our podcast as well as subscribe to it, please. It means a lot to us. And we will be back next week as well with another guest. That will be Zach Waxman. I think that is Wednesday as well. So if you want to check that out, make sure you look for it Wednesday online if you want to watch it live, or Thursday. And that does it, guys. So thanks for listening, and we will talk